emergencies. They are not asking for money, not for charity, but for an entrepreneurial approach. So from your point of view as a business voice here on the stage, so what would your new response to the modern emergencies?
Look, we are, Her Majesty said it, Peter said it, we are facing one of the biggest humanitarian crises since World War II, and if it's not greater. And we are dealing with it with the conditions of 1940s and 50s. The agencies or the way that we're dealing with it, it's very old. I got involved with this, a few years ago, simply on a business side, but I got more involved a year and a half ago when a Yazidi community got attacked, and it was all over the news. I don't forget that picture of the woman just putting her hands up and asking for help. And you can see it because if you are from the region, she is asking for help. And we acted right away, and I got involved more. And my first action was to get to understand what is actually happening. What's happening, who's helping, who's out there, and what's the solution. I saw amazing people working in the field, heroes from UNHCR or other organizations. They are there in bad conditions, but they don't complain. They just want to help. But they also asking help to do this differently because they are there and they see it all the time. I went to Lesbos, to the island when the refugees that come from the Turkish side. It was unbelievable. If an entrepreneur like me or somebody who has a business mind was in that island, it's a winter time, rooms are empty, restaurants are empty, there are a lot of people, taxis are not busy. Why there is no place for people to stay and why there is no people to transfer it in a humane way. And you could just put things together right there. It wouldn't cost you too much and it would be very, very easy. So what I'm trying to say is we need to come to this in a very, very innovative way, simple way. And the third thing is we need to get it from the business side where governments and the NGOs are doing what they are doing. We need to bring the business perspective in. And that's what I started Tent. And the biggest thing that I come to Davos for is the 10th challenge, where we ask others to join us, the ones that already has been doing it. And I am really, really encouraged with the response. So we got, LinkedIn, who's already doing work amazingly, connecting workforce with the need. And we have, Airbnb, who's providing housing in the places for the, aid workers. You got, my friend Hikmet's company CEO is the Western Union, who's up front came out. You got MasterCard, you got IKEA, for example, working for the UNHCR for the longest time, creating a better shelter for the refugees. And I think by the next couple of days, we'll have more and more, and I have more in companies. This is very encouraging. What I am hoping that we find the business perspective into this biggest humanitarian, crisis. And we bring the governments and NGOs and the business units together, break the barriers, sit around the table, or meet around the field and make it work. The other part is the business can do is, I know it from my experience, I started hiring refugees 5 years ago. I went to the refugee center in Utica and later on in Idaho, and I said, I'd like to hire them. They said, there's no transportation. I said, let's provide transportation. They said they have different languages. Actually, we hired people that they speak 11 different languages. 30% of the Chobani's workforce today is refugees, right? In New York City, in upstate New York, and in Idaho. Here's what happened. Because we hired refugees, they got job. When they got job, that is the moment they stop being a refugee, they are part of the society. And what they do is they help to build the society. I have a picture of a mother who I have in my phone as one of my best favorite pictures. Her daughter went to Yale. She said, I just don't know if this was best thing to happen to me. Can you believe that she said that? Because her daughter went to Yale. And she has a Chobani sign on her, and then daughter has the Yale and says, which one looks better? This is how we're going to build lives, because there is so much sadness. And I finish it with this anecdote where Nadia, who is a Yazidi girl, who got captured by terrorists, and horrible stuff happened to her, and you know what that is. She's a teenager, and she made her way out, and then finally made it to Germany, and then she came to the US, and I met her in the restaurant. We were having lunch. She's the only one I met. I saw on the news what happened to that community, but I never met them. I met her. All our shortcomings, the political shortcomings, economic shortcomings, whatever that is, that disagreements, all the cause of those, she paid the price. And she's looking at the world in empty eyes. And she smiled twice in 2 hours when I asked how was the mountains, Sinjar Mountains, behind her village. And she smiled, she said, our mountains were so beautiful. We used to go up there and pick flowers. She remembered there. And the second one, I said, you know, we are helping the refugee camps in northern Iraq, in Kurdistan, to bring blankets. And she smiled again. The only way we're going to make them to recover, the only way that we're going to make them at least not forget, but at least move on, is if we give our hands. And that hand is so important today, where we cannot avoid, in the refugee crisis and the refugees, which we cannot close eyes, forget about it. All we have to do is just do something about it, whether we like it or not. And I love how the business community approached to this. And I'd like to think more businesses from the region, where Turkey and Jordan and Lebanon, not only the countries, but also the people of these countries are doing their part above and beyond their capability. We'd like to see more businesses from Gulf regions to step up. And if the governments don't step up, we need the business people and entrepreneurs to step up. Because, in years, we're not going to remember who built the tallest building or who brought snow into the desert. We're going to remember who reached out to those people. We remember who has the biggest heart and who gave them the coolness to their heart. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Hamdi, for this encouraging, I think, new response of the modern emergencies. Alexander De Croo, as the Deputy Prime Minister of what we mentioned, donor country. So you've heard now so many new responses of these kind of crises and emergencies. Would this change maybe your strategy as a donor country?
Yes, it does. And I think that if you look at the refugee crisis in Europe, you have a head of state of a fairly large European country who famously said, "Das schaffen wir." And I think we need the same speech in the Syrian region. I think that at some point we need to say, this is difficult, it's never going to be perfect, but we need to tackle it in a different way. What is happening today, I think, this is the worst that you can do to a human being, is to take away his or her perspective in life. This is what is happening today. If you are 5, 6 winters in a refugee camp, people lose perspective in life. And someone who's lost perspective in life, that leads to desperate actions. And that's what we are seeing today. I think we need to acknowledge, just in the same way like we acknowledged after the Second World War in Western Europe, that this is a region with special needs, and we have special needs, you need other instruments than the classic instruments that we have seen today. I think there's 2 elements we need to focus on. First one, it was said, the average duration of a refugee life, if I can call it that way, is today 17 years, sometimes 20 years. So this is very, very long. So we need to tear down some walls. In the development world, there is a big wall between humanitarian action and development. Humanitarian action is short-term, is helping out, is a pressing need. Development is creating perspective in life. I think in what we are doing today, we need to break down that wall. And Peter, I'm I'm not saying that the ICRC should become a development agency. Don't be afraid. I think humanitarian organizations are doing a great job. But you need to combine both. And we need to, from the start, work on what I said, giving people perspective in life. And that means giving them access to the labor market, what is happening today in Turkey, giving them access to education, and acknowledging that probably at least part of their life, they're going to build it up in the region where they are. We all would hope that the Syrian conflict is solved soon, and we all hope that it's rebuilt on the short term. But if we're realistic, I think we know that it's actually going to take a few years, unfortunately. Second element is access to financing. If you look at what the combination of the member states and the European Commission is doing today, it's approximately 4.2 billion. It's an enormous amount of money, but it's not enough. And I think governments and public authorities, if we are fair, we know that we will not be able to mobilize the means that we actually need. And I think that mobilizing the private sector is something that we can do, and we can do it in a very modern way. Peter talked about what the ICRC and Belgium and hopefully some other countries is going to do together on humanitarian impact bonds, where we basically ask the private sector to pre-finance interventions based on certain metrics, and if those metrics are achieved, then you get a payout to the private investors with a certain premium. I think this is the way to do it, and if we look at the Western world, you cannot say that there's no money. I mean, there is capital. The capital is there, and very often the capital is sleeping in savings accounts to frustration of a lot of people. So I think those new instruments can really unleash things, and it's a balance. I think we should mobilize private financing, but obviously in exchange for that, the humanitarian organizations and the NGOs need to provide quality and need to look much more into what are we providing, how much impact are we providing, and is this really an impact in a sustainable way? And I think this is the way forward. I am, despite all the problems and the misery we see, I have visited some of the camps on the Turkish-Syrian border. People are still very hopeful, and people know that it's a difficult situation, and you see that some people are losing perspective, but it's not lost. I mean, not everyone has lost perspective yet, and we can give people perspective. I think if we start tearing down some walls in our own functioning, and we mobilize new ways of functioning and new ways of financing, I think it is perfectly feasible to give everyone in that region a perspective in life, and I think we owe it to humanity to do that.
Thank you, Alexander de Croo, and particular thank you that you, again, put the entire discussion into the right perspective. Means the European discussion into the relevance of the situation in the Levante. And that leads me then to the Deputy Prime Minister of Turkey. Deputy Prime Minister Simsek, so Turkey is doing, as Jordan, Lebanon, such a lot for the refugees. And you mentioned it even 2 years ago, here even at the annual meeting. So now what is, from this point of view, your perspective and your response of the modern emergencies?
Well, thank you. What we are faced is really a global issue. I mean, 60 million people flee their home simply because of violence or terror or whatever reason. This is huge by any standards. So this is a global problem. It requires global solutions. I think along with Jordan and Lebanon, Turkey is bearing quite a bit of burden. I'm actually proud of my country because we are currently hosting 2.5 million Syrians in Turkey, about 278,000 of them in camps, the rest around the country. And we've just provided them with work permits, so now they can get jobs. We provide